evening, morning, or afternoon, depending on which coast or side of the pond you're on, and welcome to an extra special edition of Across the Pitch. My name is Phil Kennedy, and Matt Robards is with me tonight as we've welcomed Daryl Grove back to the show to talk to us about his beloved Wolves, some of his favorite games, players of the past, and just some general soccer talk. Welcome back to the show, Daryl. We're very excited to have you on.
Thank you. Thank you for putting up with me twice.
Oh, well, you're the one putting up with us twice. I mean, we are more than just thrilled to have you on the show. I mean, our show would not exist if it wasn't for you and Taylor are the ones that inspired us to start Across the Pitch. And one thing that you might not know is, and I'll tell you this story later, but it's actually your show that eventually caused me to become an Accrington Stanley supporter.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I'd be interested to know how that all connects.
Yeah.
We do not have a lot of Accrington talk on our show.
Well, you did once, and that was enough for me. So I'll get to that. But Daryl, first, before we get started here, how have you been? I mean, we've all been in this kind of we can't leave the house, and of course you've had a tough battle over the past year. How are things going for you?
Oh, yeah. So cancer-wise, things are good at the moment. Things got a little bad towards the end or towards the middle of last year. And we were going to do the show, right? And I couldn't do it. I think I had to message you one time and say, hey, I can't do the show. I'm about to have surgery. So that was one reason that was pushed back.
Much more important.
Yeah. We could do it while I'm under anesthetic, but I don't think it would be all that good. But after that, I went on this clinical trial where I'm doing an immunotherapy treatment, which for about 7 months now, 6 or 7 months, has been working really well. So health-wise, I'm in good shape, which actually I'm really grateful for during this pandemic, because if I was in bad health and all this was happening, that would be maybe one too many things to be dealing with. So yeah, one disaster at a time right now.
Well, that's fantastic to hear, and now at this point, it's just a matter of us all keeping our families safe and healthy, and staying inside, and then being able to get back to football as soon as possible. And Matt, how have you been doing? I know you've had a lot of things going on here during the break from football as well.
Yeah, man, things are going well. We're in the process of learning how to homeschool 2 kids, and then we have our youngest who's not at school age, but he's got to have something to do while the other 2 are in school. So just kind of learning how to do that. But it's been good, man. And luckily, with NBC Sports kind of running the classic matches, as well as finding some places online to watch some old matches. I've been able to keep the football stream going here.
And now, Daryl, obviously, any of our listeners here in the States already know all about the Total Soccer Show, because you guys have been the best in the business for a decade now. But we do have a listener base in Accrington who might not be quite as familiar with American podcasts. So tell our listeners, in Lancashire and in that area that may not have heard, what all is the Total Soccer Show all about?
Yes, for listeners in Accrington, we have a lot of US men's national team content, which I'm sure they'll be thrilled to hear. But yeah, the Total Soccer Show, it's been around since 2009, so we're in our 11th year now. And we're a daily, Monday through Friday soccer podcast, and we basically cover any news that it touches American soccer and touches American soccer fans. So it's a lot of US men's national team, US women's national team, Premier League, Champions League. We like to do a lot of match analysis. So we'll watch a game and rewatch a game, try and understand what happened and why certain things happened. We try to really add something to a game after we've watched it, so that we're not just repeating what everybody else is saying.
Yeah, I mean, your guys' technical analysis on the game is second to none. And Matt, I know you would agree with that.
Yeah, and I just want to throw out there too, I mean, you guys also have Soccer 101, which is kind of a spin-off podcast that kind of is a great introductory podcast for people to the game. I know some people that I work with, who have heard me talk about soccer and, noticed the pictures of Stamford Bridge hanging in my office or my Phoenix Rising flag in my office, have gotten a hold of Soccer 101 to try to learn the basics of a game a little bit more. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well.
Oh, great. Thank you. Because that was the idea, right? It was aimed at maybe people who hadn't watched soccer and wanted to learn a little bit about it. And then we were trying to also appeal to people who already knew a lot about soccer, but wanted to hear some like weird stories or details. And it's quite hard to straddle those two things. So I'm really happy to hear that some people have like listened to it to learn about the game.
Yeah. It's been great, man. I've even listened to some of those episodes just to kind of further my own knowledge. And I've really enjoyed going back and listening to the ones where you pick like the Parks and Rec starting 11 or, I can't remember the other ones you've done, but those have been fun too.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah. We enjoy those, but they take so much rewatching of old sitcom episodes. It's a huge commitment. I guess we could do another one now, right? Since we've got all this spare time.
Yeah, you could do a Sunderland Till I Die starting 11, but just using the non-playing characters.
That is a really good idea. Joyce would be my captain.
Yeah. I'd have to say the taxi driver for me, man.
Oh, yeah.
I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but...
it's definitely Peter. Peter something. We were talking about him today, yeah. Yeah, he is everybody's favorite, right?
Yeah, he's awesome. He's awesome. So.
Now, Daryl, one of the things that we wanted to talk to you about is one of the things that we do on our show is to kind of introduce people to teams that aren't in the Big Six. And now, obviously, the Wolves are as close to a Big Six without being Big Six based on recent results, but it hasn't always been that way because, of course, up until last season, the Wolves had spent a few years at the championship and even down to League One before their recent success. You, of course, have been a Wolves supporter through all of that, all the way back to your days in England. So tell us a little bit about your history, how you became a Wolves supporter, your first game, that type of thing.
So I actually can't remember what my first game was, but I know the circumstances, which is Wolves is like my family team, like my dad supported them, his dad supported them, my older brother supported them. And that was definitely my first game, whenever it was my older brother taking me to a game. And I really hadn't sort of chosen a team, or I just sort of generally watched football until my older brother was like, hey, come with me. And that was it, right? I was at Molineux and watching the games. So that's the sort of genesis of how I started supporting them. So it's kind of weird. It gets a little bit just given to you. It's almost like you don't really get a choice. It's just, I guess this is where I'll go and watch football now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you kind of hit the nail on the head when it's that experience of actually going there. It really kind of puts it all together for you. And that's what I really like about the club atmosphere in England is that it's more about where are you from. It's not like over here, you have so many people that live in Idaho and root for the New York Yankees. And it's like, why? I mean, in England, if you're from Accrington, you root for Accrington. If you're from Luton, you root for Luton Town. If you're from Wolverhampton, you root for Wolves. And I just love that aspect of it.
Yeah, I think in England, people are really lucky to have that. I don't think they realize how rare that is, right? Because, in a place like the US, if you want to, to be fair to that person in Idaho, right? If they want to support a major league team, I don't know a lot about baseball, but I'm assuming there's not just a major league team that's playing out in Idaho that they could go and watch. Right. So it's a tough thing, right? And I think English people really are lucky that no matter where you live, you've got a reasonably sized club somewhere nearby.
Right, because there's in baseball, there's no promotion and relegation. So if you're going and watching your third tier team in Idaho, there's no chance that they're ever going to make it to the major league, even if they win their league every year. They just play in that same again. And in England, and like you said, I mean, you could drive 25 miles and pass 15 different stadiums in England. I've got to drive 25 miles just to get to the only stadium here for Phoenix Rising. I mean, And one thing that we often joke about on the show is for Phoenix Rising, our closest away day is Las Vegas, which is actually further than Accrington's furthest away day, which is Portsmouth. Yeah. So that puts things into perspective a little bit.
One thing I can tell you about where I came in with Wolves, I really don't know the exact year for some reason, but it was definitely as part of the upswing. So I don't know how much you know about the history of Wolves. And I don't want to like read the whole Wikipedia page at you, but I want to give you just a quick.
Well, that's what we want is with these episodes, we're kind of trying to tell the whole story to that guy out there who hasn't picked a team and wants. You're going to tell them why they should pick the Wolves over every other team out there.
Oh, so I'm pitching for Wolves as well. Okay, I'm making the case. The big story is that back in the 50s, Wolves were like one of the best teams in England. They won the league 3 times in the 50s. And if you want to be biased about it, you could say that Wolves also invented the Champions League. Because what they did is they installed floodlights. They're like possibly the best team in England. And they played a lot of what were called the floodlit friendlies against a team from Hungary called Honvéd, who had Ferenc Puskás, who most people will know his name. This was the famous Hungarian team at the time. And it was the first sort of big showpiece matches between an English club and a foreign team. And they were all like technically friendlies, but they were sold out and everybody would go and watch these games. And this apparently gave people the idea for a proper Champions League competition. That's why the European Cup comes in, I think in the mid-50s, right? Mid-50s, based on what Wolves had been doing.
I do know a little bit about this because I know that I think it was 1959 when the Wolves played Dynamo Moscow in a friendly, and then the Loughborough Dynamo took the Wolves jersey and Moscow Dynamo's name, and that's how that club formed. So I do know that part of that 1950s history with the Wolves playing those friendlies with the teams from Eastern Europe.
And if you like a comeback story, then Wolves have got one for you because they did not stay one of the best teams in England or one of the best teams in Europe. Things towards the end of the 70s and early 80s, things got very, very, very bad at Wolves. They tried to expand the stadium, or they did expand the stadium, but they basically took out bad loans to do it. And they couldn't afford to repay the loans. So they ended up in a lot of debt and losing money. And they ended up getting relegated all the way down to the 4th tier of English football. So by like the mid 80s, they were at the very bottom of the English Football League. And they looked like absolutely going out of business. Things got steadied financially a little bit. I think the city helped them out. The city sort of did some sort of forgiving the debt and leasing the stadium type thing. And then Wolves slowly go back up the leagues. And it's one of my favorite. I know you're going to ask me about favorite players later on. Everybody's favorite Wolves player is Steve Bull, who joins the team in the 80s and literally scores about 50 goals a season as Wolves get promoted from these lower divisions. They eventually get back to the 2nd tier, so the modern championship. The Premier League is just like coming online. I think this is like 90s, but the Premier League is coming online like 92. And the idea is Wolves now, they're all set. Like they're set financially. They've got a new owner, Jack Hayward, a local guy who had bought the club. They're all set to get back into the Premier League. And then it just didn't happen. This is the era that I'm supporting them. This is the era that I first start going. It's the 90s where Wolves are essentially a Premier League club in waiting who can never quite get it together enough to get into the Premier League.
So it's a lot kind of like Leeds right now, where they're just kind of knocking on the door every year and can't get in there.
Yeah, except we weren't even as good as Leeds because Leeds were top of the league for a little while, right? Back last season. And I think you're doing okay this season. Wolves were often like finishing 5th, 6th, like getting into the playoffs, losing in the playoffs. So it was it wasn't like we were actually the best team in the championship and just couldn't get promoted. It was more that like the infrastructure was there, but the on-field product was never quite good enough to make it happen.
Maybe more like Derby County's been the past few years.
Yes, that feels about right. Yeah, that feels right.
And so what was the major turnaround then? What took them there from being this kind of always the bridesmaid, never the bride, making it up into the Premier League to now where they're at, which is, a top half of the table team?
So they did briefly get to the Premier League and then got relegated, and then that's like 2003, briefly up in there 2010, 11, and then relegated in 2012, relegated again back to League One temporarily, then back up to the Championship, and then in 2016, the big turning point is that the club gets bought by Fosun International, which is essentially a Chinese investment firm. So suddenly money is not a problem for Wolves. It's not like oil money, but it's a lot of money. And they essentially have this really nice working relationship with the agent, George Mendes, and they're able to sign a lot of players that they wouldn't have been able to sign in the Championship, the second tier, unless they had this George Mendes connection. And they sort of gamble by spending a lot of money on players who are too good for the Championship. Guys like Ruben Neves, who I'm guessing you'll be familiar with, right? Because he's a reasonably high-profile Premier League player now and a Portugal international. And Wolves finally build a team in the Championship that really is the best team in the Championship. And I think they win the league, but they don't quite make 100 points. I think they get to 99 points and win the Championship finally in the 2017-18 season.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the job that they've done, like you said, just the signings where they haven't missed a beat. Everybody they brought in, and there's been so many teams that have gone the other direction, like Fulham obviously spent a tremendous amount of money only to get sent right back down. Aston Villa, they look like they're going in the same direction. So what do you think it is about the Wolves that has allowed them to spend their money properly where so many other teams aren't?
I think it's because it's all aligned, right? So the main thing was hiring the coach, Nuno. He's a Portuguese coach. He's a George Mendes guy. So instead of it just being this agent thinking these players should come to Wolves, it's this agent who's also the agent of the coach and like understands the playing philosophy that he really wants. So then everybody's on the same page, right? So every signing that is made, it's not just because, oh, that guy's famous, let's buy him, or that guy needs a big new contract, let's sign him. It's with Nuno being involved in the process as well. And then the big smart thing that they did is a lot of the players after they got to the Premier League, the first year back, they took players on loan for the season. So Raul Jimenez, who's done obviously really, really well the last couple of years, they got him from Benfica, but originally it was a loan with an option to buy, because buying a Mexican striker from the Portuguese top division, who wasn't lighting up the Portuguese top division, right? He was just doing okay. That sounds like a classic failed Premier League signing, right? That could have gone all kinds of wrong based on like a lot of very, very good strikers struggle in the Premier League. Like Josie Altidore, for example. I'm a big admirer of Josie Altidore, the player, but he had a horrible time with Hull and then with Sunderland. So the really smart thing on Wolves' part was to get Jimenez in for that loan season with the option to buy for a lot of money in the end. I think it was like 25 to 30 million they ended up spending, but they didn't actually hand the money over until they'd seen a season of Raul Jimenez in the Premier League. And I think that's been the really intelligent thing that they've done.
I think that the thing that you really pointed at that I think is really important is, like you said, Nuno having firsthand involvement in the selection of the players and being able to pick guys that fit his system, because that's one of the things we talk about is in the lower leagues. Like if you're in League One, the manager is pretty much selecting who's on the team. Once you get up to the Premier League, a lot of it is whoever the board wants to buy, and you just don't have the guy that's cooking dinner buying the groceries anymore, if you will.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And like, when you watch Wolves the last couple of years, like Jimenez, again, is a really good example, but also Diogo Jota this past year. The Wolves front two are both pretty quick because Wolves do a lot of counter-attacking, and they're both really energetic and hardworking in terms of pressing the opposition. And it would have been easy to just be like, oh, let's sign, I don't know, like Olivier Giroud might be unhappy at Chelsea. He's a big name. Let's sign him. But he's not particularly fast, and he doesn't like do a lot of hard defensive work. He's got a lot of other qualities. But I definitely feel like in the past, that's the type of big name signing that didn't fit the system, but looked good in terms of a headline. That might have been the type of signing that was made in the past, or if the coach wasn't sort of fully in control of what's going on.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think that Matt, isn't that something that we talk about quite a bit, is that if you're playing two strikers, you need to have one guy that has speed and one guy that's like a Giroud. And if you bring in two Girouds, that's never going to work.
Right. Yeah. I mean, just having that dynamic up top is so key. and Wolves have done a great job with that. Like you said, they're a counterattacking team. And so during this time, you know, kind of maybe a big person behind that, at least from someone who's not a Wolves supporter and kind of just reading and doing some research, was a guy named Kevin Thilwell.
Yeah.
Who was the sporting director. And if I remember this correctly, he just became the head of sport for New York Red Bulls.
Yeah.
And so how do you think that's going to affect Wolverhampton in these next couple seasons? Do you think they've built a strong enough support system there while he was there, where they have someone that can slide into that position and kind of just continue the thing, the operations, the gears moving? Or, you know, are you afraid that there might be a little bit of downturn in form because, you know, this guy that was kind of the sporting director is now gone? And what are your thoughts on that?
So obviously I'm not on the inside, so I don't know exactly what's going on. Right. I do know that everybody loved Kevin Thirlwell, and Kevin Thirlwell really was the chief football guy. Like, he would coordinate the scouting and where the team would stay, and the sports science type stuff. He was involved. He had a hand in everything. But he also had been promoted from within, right? So there seems to be a culture at Wolves of they promoted the best people from within to be fully connected to various parts of how the team runs. So I would have faith in the current sort of structure of Jeff Shee as the chairman on behalf of Fosun. I would have faith in Wolves finding the good people within the club and putting them in the positions to succeed. Just because that is what happened with Kevin Thirlwell. So that's the optimistic version of it. The worrisome version of it is pretty much exactly what I just said, that Thirlwell was involved in every single department, every single football-related department. And it is a huge, huge loss for him to leave the team. I mean, he left on good terms, and he essentially said the chance to go and essentially live in the United States and, you know, work I think he said live in New York. I'm assuming he could actually live in the city and commute out to Harrison for New York Red Bulls. But he left on good terms, but there's a big opportunity because America's glamorous and it's fun to move out here, essentially. Yeah. So essentially I'm waiting to see what happens. I have faith in the organization because Wolves haven't made any big organizational mistakes, but it still feels like a big loss to lose Kevin Thirlwell. I'm sort of trying to have it both ways here because I essentially don't know. Yeah. No, that makes sense, man. And what you're saying is now you don't have to worry about a guy like Charlie Methvin coming in and taking over that role, right? Yeah, I mean, so I've got a lot of faith that Wolves would not be open to a guy like Charlie Methvin. Let's put it that way. Well, awesome, man. That's cool.
All right, and then Matt, you had some questions regarding your favorite players, favorite matches, things like that. Did you want to go on those now? Yeah, man. I just this is kind of surreal for me. I listen to Total Soccer Show while I'm driving to work or running. And so just getting a chance to sit and talk with you is kind of a surreal experience. And so I just wanted to talk about some fun stuff, what some favorite matches, some favorite players. But I want to start here, man, because and I know, the couple, I've been over to England once to go to a Chelsea match. That's the team I support. And there's a very different culture in England as opposed to the US with shirts or jerseys but I'm a shirt guy. I love kits. And so I've been looking at the Wolverhampton home kit history page and just kind of looking through, man. What home kit from Wolverhampton is your favorite?
Ooh, that's a good one. I don't know how to describe it, but there's one that is a very deep goldy color. And it's from the late 90s, mid to late 90s, I think. And it's I want to say 97, 98, the era that Robbie Keane was playing. So it's really hard to differentiate Wolves kits, right? Because they're mostly just the one same thing. And it tends to be just varying shades of that goldy orangey color. Sometimes it goes more yellowy, sometimes it goes more orange. But there was this proper deep gold color from the late 90s that I really, really is my favorite color they've ever played in. Nice, man. Just kind of looking at these. What's up with this 2002, 2004 shirt with this nice Doritos logo on it? do you remember that one? I have that one. Yeah. Yeah. I think actually a problem with Wolves kits is because of that goldy orangey color. The only thing that ever looks good as a sponsor is if the logo is just pure black. Right. Any time that it's got color on it, like that Doritos, any really I don't know what the word is, prime colors or popping colors. it really jumps off the shirt in a scary, scary way. So the Doritos one definitely did that in a way that I did not enjoy.
Man, I'm a fan of like those quirky shirts like that, just like where you have this really absurd kind of sponsorship logo on the shirt. So that one kind of just jumped out to me.
Have you seen the one with the tire marks all over it?
Yeah. Is that the one that looks like it's the Goodyear from like 92, 93?
That sounds about right. Yeah.
It looks like it has like black smudge marks on it.
Yes. And I don't actually know the story behind it, but I always assume that Goodyear was a long time sponsor, right? I want to say Goodyear was all black, so it kind of worked. But Goodyear's a tire. And I think that they just sort of were like, all right, we'll put a bunch of tire marks all over the front of the jersey.
Sounds like it might have been backstock left over from NASCAR.
Oh, that's great, man. That's cool. Yeah. So, favorite Wolves match. What for you? If we're in this time of quarantine, no live soccer on right now. What's the match that you could go home tonight and just throw it on and watch all 90 minutes plus and just get lost in it?
So there's a really recent one where Wolves beat Manchester City 3-2 after going 2-0 down. I love that game because it's especially a really good Adama Traore game, right? Like he really goes out. Like there's a lot of City like overexposing themselves and Wolves counterattacking. They kind of set themselves up perfectly. So yeah, I really enjoy that game. I could definitely watch that again. I also, the first time I watched it, mostly Taylor and I watch games either on our own because we're taking notes and stuff, or we watch it together. So we quite rarely watch games in bars, but I watched this game in a bar with a good friend of ours named John, who's a Manchester City fan. So I didn't over celebrate or anything because I didn't want to upset John. Right. He's in a title race, right? So I remember not properly celebrating the goals of this game. So I'd love to rewatch it in a way where I could really, really go wild.
Really go bonkers, huh? That's awesome, man.
Matt, this was something that you first brought up, but we kind of have a theory that we've come up with that all of the best football games are ones that start off where you're down 2-0 and then come back and win 3-2. There's just something about that course of events that makes the perfect match, if you will.
Yeah, I think it's just that anticipation. Your team's down 2-0. You get that first goal and you're thinking, okay, well, we got a chance. Yeah. And then you get the second goal and it's like, okay, now we can win this. And then when the third goal happens, then that's just like how you didn't celebrate, in front of your friend. That's hats off to you, man. I don't know if I could have done that.
The other one that really, I really remember is, this is December 2018, and it's when Wolves beat Chelsea 2-1, because this is the first time after Wolves had been promoted with Nuno. They'd had like a couple of decent results here and there. Things were going okay-ish, but we definitely hadn't beaten a big team, right? We'd drawn against Manchester City. We'd drawn against Manchester United. And there was still this big question of, is this team that did so well in the Championship, is it going to be good enough to survive in the Premier League? And Wolves beating Chelsea 2-1 was the first time they'd beaten a proper big team in the Premier League. And it was the first time that I really believed, like, okay, this could really happen. And it was the first sign of what was to come the rest of last season. Right.
And that was a kind of a comeback as well, right? Because isn't that the one where Loftus-Cheek scored and
yes,
somewhere around like the 25th minute, and then you guys got two back-to-back in the second half.
Yes, that's exactly the game.
Yeah, I remember that game.
I remember that game.
Not fondly, but.
Oh, sorry. I said all that, forgetting that there was a Chelsea fan here. I apologize.
That was right around the time that we actually started this show. That might have been one of the first games that we ever talked about, the very first episode, because that would have been in when we started the show here. So yeah, I remember that one well. So, Matt, favorite players? What was your next one, right?
Yeah, and you kind of hit on that earlier, but besides, the player you mentioned earlier on, do you have any other favorite players that kind of stand out for you from Wolves?
Yeah, loads. Yeah. So the player I mentioned earlier on was Steve Bull, who is this guy who mostly played for Wolves his whole career, had lots of opportunities to move to the Premier League in the early 90s. He actually went to the World Cup with England in 1990, despite not being a top division player. But when I really got serious about going to watch Wolves, he was coming towards the end of his career, right? So I never got to go to Molineux and see peak Steve Ball, like literally 50 goals a season, Steve Ball. I can only watch that stuff on YouTube, right? I couldn't go and watch it. But the guys that I've like really seen in the flesh and really enjoyed, Robbie Keane as a teenager. I'm sure everybody knows about Robbie Keane, but his first 2 seasons were at Wolves as a 17 or 18-year-old. And it was so exciting to watch a proper teenage phenomenon who we knew we wouldn't be able to hold on to very long, right? Because we weren't getting promoted. So just to know that this kid will leave in a couple of years, but I get this chance to watch this absolute talent at 17 or 18 play for Wolves. And there were even a few games in the late 90s where Steve Bull and Robbie Keane played together. And it was definitely like watching like this old guy with dodgy knees who was on his way out and this young up and comer who we knew was going to go and do big things.
Right. Yeah. And he did. Robbie Keane did, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Tottenham, Liverpool, Tottenham again. I've said a couple times in talking with friends that I actually think Robbie Keane is probably up there as one of the top 2 or 3 signings for the MLS. I mean, just what he did at LA in and of itself, the amount of goals he scored and the amount of games, titles won. And so
that
Robbie
Keane, Beckham, Donovan trio was
right. Yeah, man, that was such a good fun time to watch the MLS for sure.
And right now, far and away, my favorite player is Adama Traore.
Yeah.
So the first thing is that when Wolves signed Adama Traore, I knew this is a player my dad is going to love, right? So my dad is a big Wolves fan. He won't go to the games because there's too much swearing. That's what he says. But he always watches Wolves on television. And he always says, you can't beat a good winger. He loves, that's his conception of football. Like he just loves any team that has a winger that will dribble at people, right? So I knew when Adama Traore signed for Wolves that this is absolutely the guy that my dad is going to love watching. And it's really been a pleasure to watch Traore go from a player that people had a lot of questions about. Like there was always the question of like, what's his end product like and this and that. And I definitely, I don't want to say I was ahead of the curve, but I really started to see, okay, this guy's really got it figured out and he's going to perform really well towards the end of last season. And then you've seen it this season that, it's currently suspended, but this season so far, I want to say, actually, you guys let me know, because I don't know if this is a very Wolves perspective, but it feels to me like Adama Traore has been one of the stories of the Premier League season.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, especially talking like that game against City, just the way he's able to take control of a game, his speed. I would say he definitely has been just kind of the story of the season, and hopefully it finishes out so we can see how that story ends.
Yeah.
So a couple questions for you about Adama Traore. One, do you buy that he doesn't lift weights?
I mean, there's no reason not to believe him, right? Like, why would he? Why would he say that if it wasn't true? It's really odd.
I got to imagine though that he's doing something a little bit. And maybe to him, lifting weights is he's not like Akinfenwa lifting weights.
Yes. So he's not like doing big deadlifts, but he's got to be in the gym, right? He's a professional athlete. They're all in the gym at some point.
Well, I know that there was Herschel Walker, who is an American football player. He never lifted weights, but every day he did 1,500 sit-ups and 1,500 push-ups every day. That was his regimen. So maybe he has something like that where he just specifically doesn't do weights.
Yeah, maybe. I got to imagine he's doing something though. I mean, he's a beast, and to keep the speed is impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean that was always the knock, right? That he was fast, but like he couldn't cross or couldn't shoot, and he still makes some odd decisions in terms of like when to shoot. But I think his sort of final ball and his decision making of like when to play that final ball and where to place it has been incredible for at least 6 months now. And it just makes him just incredibly deadly, right? Because he's one of the bravest players I've seen in terms of receiving the ball and just knowing I am going to run at you. And I've never looked at the stats, but I'll bet his sort of take on percentage rate is absolutely off the charts.
Right. So kind of the second question there is, do you think Wolves will be able to hang on to him? With everything he's done this year, with everything he did previously with Wolverhampton, whatever kind of transfer window we're looking at here this summer or maybe into the fall at some time, Do you think he stays at Wolves, or do you see someone coming and offering a lot of money for him?
I think he stays at least another year. I've gone back and looked at a lot of what's gone on with Adama Traore's career. And it really seems to be when he's got a manager that he likes and believes in him, he does really, really well. So there was a spell when he was at Middlesbrough where he really was like in really good form in the Championship. And it's because apparently him and Tony Pulis were really tight. And Pulis would really look after him. And he didn't necessarily want to leave there. So he stuck around a little while. But when he was at Villa, it wasn't quite as productive. So I'd be placing my hopes in the idea that Traore, for the first time, is playing at the top level and is performing really, really well and is really, really happy. And I think he'd be smart enough to not think that maybe I'll just leave all this behind and gamble elsewhere. I don't expect that like he'll spend the rest of his life at Wolves if he keeps playing the way that he's playing.
Right. Yeah, he seems at 24, to not be of that age. I think there's a lot of players, and they're 19, they're 20, and that big club comes calling and they get their head turned and they think, okay, let's go after this. And then it turns out to be a really rough first couple seasons. And I think you could look at a guy like Pepe at Arsenal, who had one good season at Lille, gets the big move to Arsenal and has struggled this year. Whereas Traore being a little bit older, that might save him from making that same mistake.
And he's already been at a big club, right? Like I want to say maybe his first club was Barcelona.
Right.
So he was at Barcelona and playing for Barcelona B. That's where I first saw highlights of him. So it's not as if he doesn't know what it's like to be at a big club, which I think is some of the draw sometimes. I think people want to think like, oh, what's it like to be there? But if you've already been at one of the biggest clubs in the world, maybe it's not such a big deal to go from from Wolves to Chelsea. Like maybe it's not that big of a jump if you've already been at Barcelona.
Right. Yeah. I mean, looking at his kind of club career here, it looks like he made 2 appearances for Barcelona. One was replacing Neymar late on, and the other one was replacing Cesc Fabregas. So when you're coming on for guys like that, you've certainly have reached that epitome of world football.
And I want to give you my absolute favorite moment of the last season. And it's a Adama Traore moment. It's when Wolves play Crystal Palace in, I want to say September, so quite early in the season. So Traore is like constantly running at Crystal Palace's left back. I want to say it's Van Aanholt at the time. Constantly running at him, getting to the end line, putting in some decent crosses. But he gets to a point where Van Aanholt is so sick of being beat for pace that when Traore approaches him on the right wing, Van Aanholt just backs off like 10 yards to give himself plenty of room. And you see Traore sort of look at him and be like, you idiot, like you've just given me all this room to cross. So all he did was back off and let Traore have space to cross. And I think it's a moment of like people underestimating, thinking that Traore can only do one thing, which is like dribble to the end line at pace. But what happens is Traore looks up and delivers a perfect ball for Wolves to score at the far post. So he definitely like laid out this thing of, all right, if you're going to back off me because you're scared of me going past you, I just won't go past you. I'll cross the ball in and we'll score that way.
Right. That's awesome.
Yeah, now one thing that you mentioned in terms of story of the season, and to me, one of the things that's been kind of the story of the last 2 seasons has been not just the Wolves' success overall, but the fact that they've been giant killers. And of course, you mentioned Chelsea and Man City, but I think they've knocked off at least every Big Six club once in the past 2 seasons. What do you think is it that specifically makes it that the Wolves are knocking off all of these Big Six clubs?
So what really works is if these teams come at Wolves because they're so good on the counter-attack, right? So Wolves have they've been playing roughly like a 5-3-2, and they have this really tight like back 3, back 5 situation where you rarely see teams get in behind Wolves, right? They've always got bodies back. So they got like a tight back 5, 3 hardworking midfielders in front of them. And then usually the 2 strikers are like Jimenez and Jota, or sometimes Jimenez and Traore, who are willing to sort of do the defensive work and hassle you. But as soon as Wolves get the ball, there is pace on the counter. There's Traore's pace, there's Jimenez's pace, there's Jota's pace, there's Ruben Neves and João Moutinho like playing really nicely weighted through balls for them. So to sum it up, it's like a combo of really tight defensive structure that's hard to break down, But then as soon as it turns over, Wolves have the players to really threaten you without committing too many numbers forward. Because then Wolves don't get caught on the counter attack coming the other way, because they can still attack you with just Traore, Jimenez, Jota, maybe the left wing back or Matt Doherty or someone like that. They can get you with just 4 or 5 players instead of sending the whole team forward and taking too many risks.
I just kind of wanted to follow up on, you're talking about the formation they play, this 5-3-2. And we all kind of, we've talked about Adama Traore, we've mentioned Raul Jimenez, we've mentioned Diego Jota. But for you, who's kind of the unsung hero in this squad that starts week in and week out, that is making everything click, that, if he's that piece, if you took him out, you would see a little bit of a struggle? Who's that one guy that's the unsung hero?
Did you mention João Moutinho?
I did not.
So that, for me, that's the guy. João Moutinho is like genuinely Premier League class in a way that I've never seen in a Wolves shirt before. Like, I thought Ruben Neves was great, but when you see Moutinho playing alongside him, he's this like super experienced guy who's played all over the place, but had never played in the Premier League. And he's got to be like 32 or so at this point. Like, he's not a young footballer, but he's this guy that he has that thing where he's impossible to shake off the ball, right? Like, he'll fight for the ball and win it back, but then he'll do that great thing where he can turn and shield. No one can get it off him. And then he'll pick out a pass that no one else can see. So he brings this real like next level of class on the ball that I don't think any other Wolves player has.
Right on, man.
The last thing that we wanted to ask you about before we wrap up on the Wolves, so this is kind of what we always finish up these with, is for, like I said, for those folks out there who are maybe looking for a favorite Premier League team, what's the number one reason that they should pick the Wolves?
Oh, the crest. The logo and the crest is, I think, the best in the Premier League.
It is iconic. I think that's hard to argue with.
I think a lot of English football crests have a lot going on, and Wolves really just went for the I'm trying. It's like got hard edges, and it's like a black like wolf's face shape with just 2 threatening little eyes in the middle. I think it's the best design element about the whole team.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where like you said, there's just so many of them out there that a lot of them are based on like old coats of arms and things like that. So there's just a lot going on where the Wolves, it's just the wolf, and it's there. And I think if you look at American sports, some of the most iconic logos are some of the most simple, like that. The Dallas Cowboys, for instance, they never change their logo. It's just that blue star, and people know what it is. And Matt, you'd agree with that?
Yeah, for sure, man. That it's just iconic, and so sometimes simplicity is often better.
Sorry, the other reason I'd give is Traore himself. I really think for me at least, he's like appointment television. You know what I mean? Because it's one player on the pitch. Every time you watch a Wolves match, it's one player who every time he gets the ball, like everybody leans forward a little bit and you can see defenders tense up a little bit. And I'm not saying he's like the best player in the Premier League or anything like that, but he's maybe the most exciting player in the Premier League because you kind of know what he's going to do. And what he's going to do is run at people and probably beat them. And that is absolutely thrilling because the game always opens up when Traore starts dribbling.
Yeah, I'm a winger fan myself. I mean, all of my favorite players to watch. I mean, there's just something about that. Like you said, a guy that can dribble up the wing and fire it into the box. And speaking of crust, they have a lot going on, and you can see a crust that has a lot going on because I use it as my Skype icon. And I did want to tell you the story of how your show is the reason that I became an Accrington Stanley supporter, or at least got me on that track.
Can I take a guess? Does it involve Ian Rush?
It does.
Yes. All right. I think I know what it is, but I still want to hear the story.
Okay. So like I mentioned earlier, you were we started the show here about September of 2018. And I want to say it was probably August of 2018. You had a listener question on your show, and it was Taylor that read the question off. And I believe the question was just something like, why is Accrington Stanley funny? And you're like, oh, it's because of the milk commercial, and it told the whole story. And so, I was listening to the show at work, and I came home and looked up the milk commercial on YouTube, and I kind of said, well, I want to see what Accrington Stanley is up to. And I just immediately just was taken by the history and, learning that they had just got promoted from League One, and that it dated all the way back to the 1888 Football League, and that the team had gone out of business in 1962, reformed in the 9th Division in 1970. Now they're all the way back up to League One, and that the £10,000 from that milk commercial literally kept them in business in 1988, and it's just an incredible thing. And so then we started the show, and then the second episode, we actually got Scott Brown, who is a midfielder for Accrington, to come on the show. Was our first ever guest. And we've, at this point this season, we've now interviewed just about every first-team player for Accrington, many retired players, and we also started the official Accrington Stanley Supporters Club of North America, where we work directly with the team's official supporters trust. So all of that started from that question on your show.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. I didn't know that they got money. You said they got £10,000 for letting them use their name in that commercial?
Yeah, so basically the commercial was actually originally written for Tottenham Hotspur. It was supposed to be only be good enough to play for Tottenham Hotspur. They said, nope, we're not going to let you do that. So then they went out looking for a team that had the same number of syllables, came across Accrington Stanley, non-league, desperate for money. They would have been at the, I think, Conference Premier North, which is the 7th tier at that time. Yeah. And they were literally, every year, they didn't know if they were going to pay the bills or not. And so that they got £10,000 for that commercial. That kept them going for a few years. A couple of years down the road, they got Brett Ormerod and sold him off to Blackpool. And that kept them going for a few more years. And it was just like, every few years, something would keep them going until Andy Holt finally took the team and brought them some stability a few years ago.
So how do Accrington fans and players and anyone involved with the club, how do they feel about that milk commercial? Like, do they think of it fondly, or are they annoyed at being the butt of the joke? Like, what's the take on the commercial?
Well, I mean, I think that it's one of those things where there's probably, there's people that, if you're from Accrington and you traveled somewhere and say, I'm from Accrington, and you have to hear about the milk commercial from every single person you meet, that aspect gets annoying to them.
I'm sure.
But then on the other hand, so for instance, there's a fanzine that's produced by a guy named Josh Cook, who's actually coming on the show again next week. It's called Raw Milk. So I mean, they have a good sense of humor. I mean, the in order to be an Accrington supporter, you have to have a good sense of humor and be a little self-deprecating. I mean, we're kind of the supporters group that, people say Accrington's tin pot. We're like, so what? We're in League One. But yeah, so I mean that's kind of the take is it gets annoying if you have to hear from it, but everybody appreciates the fact that one of the kind of mottos that Accrington really has two mottos. One is the club that wouldn't die, and then the other one is the biggest little club in the world, and it's really because of that commercial that the team became world known.
That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, it's the first time I'd ever heard of them was when I saw the commercial as a kid. So yeah, I guess it does bring them a certain degree of fame, right?
Yeah, and then there's even been remakes of the commercial where they made League One. There was a remake of the commercial that Ian Rush actually appeared in, and it was two new kids basically doing the same commercial. And then for whatever reason, Ian Rush is sitting on the couch in their living room and says, "No, you're wrong, kids. Accrington Stanley is now in League One." And there was also a vodka remake with Coral Rice, the original actor.
Yes, I've seen that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that one I guess got banned, but you can find both of those out on YouTube. But yeah, and then if your dad is a fan of wingers, tell him to check out Jordan Clark. He is a fantastic winger for Accrington Stanley. Unfortunately, he's out of contract. Will probably be somewhere in the championship next year.
All right. Yeah. I will. I'll pass that on.
Matt, what else did you have?
Man, that's all I got, Phil. Daryl, thanks so much for talking with us tonight. It's been an absolute honor for us.
Oh, wow. Thank you, guys. I feel, I don't know. I feel like maybe the Total Soccer Show doesn't deserve all this, but I really appreciate it.
It really, Daryl, I mean, for you to come on our show and to get a hello and welcome to Across the Pitch, I mean, that made my dream come true that you actually came on the show and said that earlier on that last episode that we did. I mean, thank you so much. And, we've really, really enjoyed everything and hopefully have you on the show again in the future.
Yeah, anytime. Yeah. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Daryl. And you have a great night.
You too.
Cheers.
Thanks, Daryl.
Bye, guys. Good night.
Have a good one, man.